Hello and welcome to the VCDX Podcast, a short bi-weekly podcast focused on the VCDX certification with news, updates and special guests. I'm Simon Long, VCDX number 105, and this week I'm going to explain what the VCDX Podcast is all about, what to expect, and a guest interview with none other than myself. Here's a taste of what's coming up. It's okay to say I don't know. In the defense, a lot of people don't feel that they can say I don't know, and they start to talk and talk. One of the questions that I get asked a lot is around the presentation. Kind of give a high level overview of some of the main business requirements, some of the reasons why you're working on the project that you're doing. By having a good kind of recap of the project and then of the logical design straight afterwards helps the panelists remember the design. As this is the first episode, I should probably tell you what it's all about. But first off, let me explain why I decided to create this podcast. As a VCDX panelist, I get asked a lot of the same questions. I felt this would be a good place to be able to respond to those questions. I also hear and read a lot of false information regarding the VCDX program and the defense process. So I thought this would be a good place to try and share my views on that information. I'm always looking for ways to help people who are considering or who are actively pursuing the VCDX certification. And I feel this might be a good way to help cast a wider net than just blogging. So the podcast is going to be split into 3 sections. We're going to kick off with news and updates about the VCDX program. So any changes, any dates that you need to be aware of, etc. We'll bring them up in this section. And then we're going to have a special guest interview each week. And these special guests will be a mixture of VCDX panelists, people who have passed the VCDX, VCDX mentors, people who are even planning on going for their VCDX. And each week we're going to ask them similar questions, and I'll try and give you an example today when I interview myself. And then we're going to end each week with some Q&A. Hopefully we'll get a lot of questions from people who are interested in the VCDX program, and they maybe want for some clarification on certain things. So we're going to actually go through some of the questions that we get sent, and hopefully we can answer those. If you can think of other VCDX related information that you'd like to hear on this podcast, feel free to message me, and I'll certainly do my best to include it into the podcast. So let's start with this week's news and updates. So one bit of news I want to share is around the online VCDX workshop that's coming up in just over a month's time. So if you are out there and you're preparing for your VCDX, or you're considering going for your VCDX certification, the online VCDX workshop is a great way of getting a lot of good information so you're prepared for your defense, and also gives you an opportunity to listen to a VCDX panelist and ask them questions throughout the go. Some of the things that we'll cover within the workshop includes an overview of the VCDX program and process. So if you're quite new to it and you're not really sure what it's all about, it's a good place to start. They'll talk about the solution design, selection and development, the application process and what documentation is required for the certification. And they'll also talk about the VCDX design scenario, what that's all about and what to expect. So if you're interested, I will put a link in the show notes for you to be able to register and sign up. This, as I said, this is an online event, and this is on Friday, May the 24th. So definitely really recommend doing this. 1, if you're actually actively going for your VCDX. 2, if you're considering it to get a bit more information about what it's all about and what the process is. So definitely worth checking that out. And that's all I have for news and updates on this week's episode. Next up, the guest interview. Now, as I mentioned in this week's episode, I'm going to be interviewing myself, but I'll be asking myself the same questions as I would a special guest, and hopefully next week, or the next episode, I will have someone else. It won't just be me talking to myself for 5 to 10 minutes. So let's get started. But in this episode, as I'm interviewing myself, I'm not actually going to ask the questions. So as a little bit of a tester for you, can you figure out what questions I'm actually asking? My name is Simon Long. I'm VCDX number 105. I have the VCDX certifications for the desktop mobility and for the data center virtualization tracks. And I passed the VCDX, I think it was definitely at Barcelona VMworld, and I think it was around 2015. So my current role is a senior solutions architect at Datrium. A senior solutions architect at Datrium, which actually is a startup, gets involved with everything from tech marketing to creating solution white papers to getting involved with some of the sales process, enablement internally and externally, all sorts of things. So what I enjoyed most about my VCDX defense process was the actual defense itself. Fortunately enough, I had prepared well. So whilst I was in doing the presentation and answering the questions, I felt reasonably relaxed. I was comfortable with my design, comfortable with decisions I made. So that, for me, was probably one of the more enjoyable side of things. What I enjoyed least, probably the lead up to the defense, kind of the week before, the anxiety you get, the nerves, the second guessing what you're going to get asked, the questioning yourself, am I prepared enough? Have I done everything right? So for me, that was probably the least enjoyable part of the whole process. So if I could go back in time, back to when I was preparing for the VCDX, what 3 pieces of advice would I give myself? So I think probably number 1 would be, it's not going to be as stressful as you think in terms of the actual defense. So try not to worry too much about it. Just relax and enjoy it and then learn from it. So that would probably be my first piece of advice. Secondly, I'd say it's okay to say I don't know in the defense. A lot of people don't feel that they can say I don't know, and they start to talk, and they end up mentioning something that maybe they don't really fully understand, and then they start to get questions on that, and it then goes from bad to worse. So if someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, feel free to say I don't know, and then maybe say I don't actually know, but maybe this is where I can find out that information. So that's always a good thing to do. And lastly, probably another good bit of advice is that the actual panelists who are there listening to you and asking you questions, they're actually there to help you and not to make you feel small. So yes, they're going to ask you tough questions, but those questions are to actually see how well you understand a topic or a technology. And by them understanding what you know, they can score you better. So if they're asking particularly tough questions, they're not trying to trip you up. They're just trying to get a gauge of where you are in your knowledge. So for those, they're the 3 pieces of advice that I would have given myself, have I known what I know now. So now I've given you my 3 words of advice. I'm pretty sure if I'm actually interviewing someone else, we'd probably have a little bit of a chat right now. But as it's just me, I'm not going to do that. So we're going to quickly move on to the Q&A section. So in the Q&A section, hopefully you guys out there who are having questions, things on your mind about the VCDX process, what to expect, what you've heard, is it true? Feel free to message me on Twitter at simonlong_, or you can email me via my blog, simonlong.co.uk. Just go to the contact me page and you can message me there. And I'll put the link to both my Twitter account and my blog in the show notes. But one of the questions that I get asked a lot is around the presentation. The first part of the VCDX defense is essentially an introduction to the project, an introduction to the design. And often people will ask me, what should I do? How long should I talk for, etc. So what I typically recommend is to just imagine it was the customer that you're presenting to, or maybe a board of directors, and you want to kind of keep it reasonably short to begin with. I personally did about a 10-minute presentation, and I started off by introducing the project, like the customer, gave them a bit of background on the customer, because occasionally they might not know who the customer is or what industry they're in. So it gives the panelist a good background of the customer. And then it'll be good to kind of give a high level overview of some of the main business requirements, some of the reasons why you're working on the project that you're doing. Often you'll be there either because they're deploying a new platform or they're having issues with an old environment, for example. It'd be good to get an idea of why you're actually there, why you're doing it. And from there, you can start to dig into, some of the other business requirements, some of the issues that you saw, and then you can start talking about the logical design, where you taken the business requirements and how they've translated into the logical design. And at that point, you can then decide if you wanted to go into the technical design itself. So that's kind of how I laid things out, and it seemed to work for me okay. What we definitely don't want is people coming into the presentation section and literally saying, "Hi, my name is Simon. I want to talk to you about this project. This is how many hosts we had, and this is how many network cards were installed in the hosts. We put this much memory in them, etc." We want to kind of get a bit of story behind it. So people who are on the panel, each VCDX kind of defense section, we have a lot of designs to review. And if you're having 5 or 6 a week, sometimes they all kind of blur into one. So by having a good kind of recap of the project and then of the logical design straight afterwards helps the panelists remember the design. So that would be one of my recommendations, and that's certainly a question I get a lot. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of how you should go about going towards the presentation itself. So if you have any questions that you want answering, as I mentioned, you can message me on Twitter @SimonLong_ or message me via my blog, simonlong.co.uk, and I'll try my best to answer them in a future episode. So that's it for the first episode of the VCDX podcast. I probably should mention that this podcast is not endorsed by VMware in any way. This is run by myself independently. But thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please share it on social media, recommend it to others who are possibly interested in doing the VCDX program. And I look forward to speaking to you in 2 weeks' time.